This is officially week 11, and we're doing the fall of Babylon, looking at chapter 17 and 18. And 17 and 18 is like the culmination, the climax of the book, what everything's been leading to, the seals, the trumpets, the bowls, everything leading up to this pivotal point in the book. The way the author has, the way John's been going, the way the revelation, the vision's been coming to him. It's the most exegetically rich chapter in two chapters in the book, I do believe, with scriptural references and the argument that's being made here. It deals with the fall of Babylon. And one thing that I didn't put in the notes to deal much with, but we're just gonna bring it out as we look at it. But many people, there are different ways that people understand what Babylon is. Most people understand Babylon to be Rome, and what John is seeing in the Revelation deals with either imperial Rome when Nero was there, or Domitian was there, or represents Rome as it has evolved into the Roman Catholic Church. There's many different ways that people look at it and see Rome in it, but I don't think Rome is here. I don't think Rome is the brunt. I don't think Rome is Babylon in Revelation. I think God, through his revelation to John and through John, is making a statement about Jerusalem and calling Jerusalem Babylon. And part of what I want to do in the study today is defend that claim, to substantiate that claim. So that's the question at the center of these two chapters: who is Babylon? And so we're going to walk through and see. So we're first going to look, part one here is the harlot on the beast. This is beginning in chapter 17, the first 6 verses, but we're going to walk through how we got it laid out. So let's see the first 2 verses on the vision. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." So he's like, "Oh, okay, John, you've seen a lot of stuff. Come here, we're going to show you something else now. We're going to shift in the vision to show you what we're talking about." And this harlot imagery, it draws immediately from Old Testament passages such as Ezekiel 16 and Ezekiel 23. And there's reference here into Isaiah chapter, the first chapter of Isaiah as well, where in verse 21, Isaiah writes how the faithful city has become a whore. And we understand the implication here. I think I've hit on it the past 2 or 3 weeks. God is Jerusalem's husband. He has made covenant with her. You worship me. You don't go after any other gods. You're solely mine. And Jerusalem and Israel said, no, I don't think so. And we're constantly chasing after other nations and other nations' gods. And the Bible, actually, I will not quote any of it. You can read it in your own time, and you can be like, I can't believe this is in the Bible. Ezekiel 23, God uses very strong language about the way that Jerusalem and Samaria are lusting after Egypt, wanting Egypt when God is their husband. And what do they want? They want Egypt. They want Assyria. They want Babylon. They want anyone but God. That has been historically in the Old Testament the way that Israel has been. And so this language, it's covenantal language. And if it's covenantal language, then it can't have anything to do with Rome. It's got to have to do with the covenant God has made. And the only covenant God had made was with the nation of Israel. And so in verses 3 through 6, we're going to see this harlot described, and this is going to be key as well. "And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly." So here's the vision. It's like a zooming in to that woman clothed in scarlet that's riding on the beast. She is specifically drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. If we take Scripture in context and look at the entirety of Scripture, we've made this case over and over in this class that, especially it's really clear in Matthew, Jesus repeatedly says, upon you will come the blood of righteous Abel to Zechariah, whom you slew. And he's talking to the religious leaders. Those, of course, those religious leaders alive at that moment did not kill Abel, right? They did not kill Zechariah, but they were constantly in opposition. So let's say Isaiah came on the scene at the same time of Jesus, or instead of Jesus. What would they have done to Isaiah? Exactly what they did to Isaiah when he was alive 500 years previously. They would have rejected him, would have killed him. All of the prophets, all of those servants that God sent to Israel, every time they saw them, they rejected them, ignored them, persecuted them, sometimes tortured and killed them. Every one of them. And then the Son of God comes, and that's exactly what they do. And so that is Jerusalem, who is this woman riding this beast here. The purple and scarlet she's clothed in purple and scarlet. And it recalls the colors of the temple curtain and the high priest's garments. If you look at your own time in Exodus 26 and Exodus 28, you will see how the high priest is dressed. Very particular phrasing, colors of the garments that the high priest wore. And that is what this woman is wearing, the exact same colors. The high priest was to have on his mitre, on his turban, "Holy to the Lord," written across his forehead on his turban that he's wearing. This woman has something written across her forehead as well, but it is not "Holy to the Lord," is it? The names of blasphemy. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. That's what's written on her forehead. So God is showing John that Jerusalem, who should have been the faithful bride, has become the harlot. And part of what Revelation is one way of looking at it, one aspect of the book of Revelation is that it is a divorce decree, a bill of divorcement to his faithless bride, who he does not call a bride, right? He calls a harlot. And what do we see down the road? In just a couple more chapters in Revelation, we see a new bride. We see the new Jerusalem descending from heaven, from God, as a bride adorned for her husband. And what we see in Revelation is the divorce of the unfaithful bride, and then God taking a new bride to himself, and the bride is the church. But let's see, I have a reference here. I can't remember what I put in your notes. I make your handout from mine. I don't remember if I leave it there, but Exodus 28, 36, and 37. You shall make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it, like the engraving of a signet, holy to the Lord. And you shall fasten it on the turban. Fasten it on the turban by a cord of blue. It shall be on the front of the turban. Everywhere the priest goes, he has holy to the Lord across his head. Now, when he lives in such a way that is hypocritical of what he's got written across his forehead, it exposes him as not really being holy to the Lord. The blood of the saints and the martyrs is the definitive identification marker. As I guess I've already said all this, but Matthew 23:37, the blood comes upon, he says, Jerusalem is the one who kills the prophets and stones those sent to her. Stephen in Acts 7 makes the same indictment. You always resist the Holy Spirit as did your fathers. And which one of the prophets have you not persecuted? Is what he's talking to the people that are about to stone him. You've persecuted all of them. And that's a way of saying, look, I'm one and you're about to persecute me. You're about to kill me. And he's making that case. James is killed in Jerusalem. The apostles are persecuted from Jerusalem outward. The Jewish establishment in every city stirs up opposition to Paul throughout Acts. It's one thing to notice. In the book of Acts, there are Jews everywhere, in every city. And every time Paul and Barnabas, or Paul and Silas, or Paul and Timothy, or whoever goes into a new city, they immediately encounter opposition by the Jews. Constantly, everywhere they go. Those who are um, guilty of killing all the prophets. Right? They're just continuing to do what they've always done. Jerusalem is the source of the blood that cries from the altar. Part 2, we see the angel's interpretation in 17:7 through 18. So we first see the beast with 7 heads in verses 7 through 11. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction." The beast that was and is not and is about to be is a dark parody of the one who was and is to come. That's how the Father and the Son are both described in the book of Revelation. And just like you have the Father, Son, and Spirit, and you have the beast, you have the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet as a dark parody of the Trinity. Here you have a dark parody of the one who was and is to come. And that you have one who was and is not and is about to be, rising from the bottomless pit. The beast itself is an 8th king who belongs to the 7. And this is one of the most important passages in dating the book of Revelation. Without going down this rabbit trail very long, I think you had the question, Avery, a few weeks back about this, and I said I was going to send you stuff, and of course I didn't. You need to remind me. But the number of the kings here. So, well, first, back up just before that, the 7 heads were 7 mountains. Rome was historically in antiquity known as the Septimontium, which is the city on 7 hills, or the 7 hills, the 7 mountains. And when John is writing this, the 7 heads are 7 mountains. Everyone who read that would have immediately identified Rome. Now, maybe they would have been wrong. That's a possibility, but they would have immediately identified Rome. And then the five kings have fallen. One is, and one is to come. If you begin counting the emperors, you begin with Julius Caesar, the very first Caesar. And then after Julius is murdered, there's about 20 years or so where there is no emperor. There's no that sort of a thing. But then after him, you have Augustus, which would be the second one, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius. Those 5 have died at this point. The one who is Nero. And Nero is the emperor until 68. So from about 50, let me do the math on the top of my head, 54 or 55 to 68. He had a 13 and a half year reign as emperor, and he would have been the emperor alive here. And then there's one more, the 7th, who must come. And when he comes, he must reign for just a little while. And here's the interesting thing. Nero reigned for almost 13 and a half years. After him was Galba. There was Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian, 4 emperors that all became emperor within a year. This is literally in history known as the year of 4 emperors, where I don't remember, I should have had this for you, but I don't remember. They're each murdered, and someone else takes their place, and they're murdered, or they die, and it's just, the empire is in turmoil because they can't keep an emperor, for one, and when Nero dies, the empire almost falls apart. Like the civil war that takes place in the empire and people vying for and fighting for power and the sectarianism that happens over the next 4 years until that 10th one, Vespasian, comes to power and reunites the empire. And so the beast, as we will see as we look at the beast, one of its heads is wounded, but then the wound is healed and the whole world marvels. Rome is in turmoil and about to fall apart. And part of that is when Rome pulled back, when they first came in, to besiege Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, and the Christians said, we got to get out of here. And then mysteriously, after just a few days, the army falls back. Part of that was due to what happened with Nero and the civil conflict that happened. And so they pulled back, regrouped, and they came back on Jerusalem. But by this time, as far as we know, all the Christians had abandoned Jerusalem. And then there was, let's look at the 10 horns in verses 12 through 14. Is that where? 12, yeah, 12 through 14. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. We don't know. It's speculation who the 10 kings are. Some commentaries and some of my reading said that it was like a symbolic number. I have a problem with the symbolic number because all the other numbers in this whole chapter fit pretty well. You know, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to say that this number is symbolic when the 7 heads and the 7 heads aren't. You know, 7 heads, I mean, they're symbolic, but it's of the number 7, right? And so what I strongly believe what this is, we just can't identify all of them, but it is some rulers over provinces, so to speak, that received authority from, it would have been Nero at the time, or maybe Vespasian by then, to be united against Jerusalem. Because when we think of, and here's the thing, when we think of Rome attacking Jerusalem, there's more to it than that. Because Rome ruled the known world. And there were people outside of Rome's rule on the fringes, and there were people like Jerusalem that didn't want to be ruled by Rome. But Rome was happy to employ people who, you could say for the sake of money, sure, yeah, I'll turn on Jerusalem. You know, they're rebelling. They're in a rebellion against you, and we don't want to be. We're on your side. Sure, we'll help you with Jerusalem. And some of them would have been King Agrippa at this time, who wanted to be loyal to Rome, right? He was over Judea and the region, and he's like, hey, guys, you need to submit. You need to quit uprising. You need to get back in line and keep the peace. You need to quit rebelling against Rome. And so Agrippa would have probably been one. Antiochus, another ruler, Malchus of Arabia. So it's like we can identify some of these for sure, and we can still understand the argument. Like, we don't have to know exactly who those 10 are to understand what's being said. And of course, this is coming from this particular understanding of Revelation. There are those who see all of this as yet in the future, and you know what they also can't do? They also can't tell you who the 10 kings are. They're still in the future. At one point, it was the European Union, if I'm not mistaken, until there were more than 10 nations in it. And then, you know, they're like, well, this can't be it anymore. So what makes the most sense is that it was 10 real kings. We just don't know who they are at the moment. Verses 15 through 18. And we're looking here at the waters and the woman. And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. And that is kind of a red flag. Like, would that not be Rome that has dominions over the kings of the earth? But that would be saying that Rome is turning on Rome in this power, in this chapter, which doesn't make any sense. But what's happened is, you can even picture in Solomon for a minute. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 girlfriends on the side, 1,000. And most of those were not just out of his lustful desires. Most of them were not. Most of them were to making arrangements with other nations. So he was marrying the daughter of this other king, the daughter of this other king, and the daughter of this prince over here to make treaties, so to speak, with all these other nations to try to maintain the peace. Well, take Solomon and make him into the city. This is what Jerusalem has constantly done, constantly gone after Assyria and Egypt and Babylon and whoever she could. And the kings of the earth have drunk the wine of her fornication. That's what we just saw in this chapter. So here we see that the beast itself, the woman is on top of this beast, riding this beast, but now the beast and the heads and the horns all turn on the woman. And so the beast is Rome. And as much as, the religious leaders used Rome. We've been seeing it on Sunday mornings. They needed Pilate to execute the death warrant for Jesus. They needed Pilate. When Pilate asked, what shall we do? What shall I do with your king? They all, with one accord, said, we have no king but Caesar. They were loyal to Emperor Caesar at that time. Over King Jesus, over the God of Scripture. They thought they were doing right, many of them, but they were so wickedly deceived that they, with one voice, said, Rome, we want you to kill the Son of God, is what they were saying. So they needed Rome. Jerusalem was dependent upon Rome, and now what's happening in 68, 69, and 70 AD is that Rome is fed up and is turning on the prostitute that's been using the power of Rome. So that's what we see happening right here. Verse 18 identifies the woman as the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. And in the first century, Jerusalem held a unique religious dominion. They had the city of the temple, the center of the covenant, the city whose religious authority reached Jewish communities across the entire empire. Her dominion was not political like Rome's. Rome had a political dominion, but Jerusalem's dominion was covenantal and religious. And it extended over the kings of the earth in the sense that her influence shaped the religious landscape of the entire known world. Again, in antiquity, nothing looked like the temple in Jerusalem. It was brilliant, it was beautiful, and it cost billions of dollars to make. It was an attraction, and we also seen in the temple commerce that millions of dollars worth of merchandise and sacrificial animals, and you got to think too, the temple built and maintained out of all this was currently in Jesus' day still being built, right? It was not complete. The temple part was finished, but the rest of the court was still being built, and it wasn't done until about the year 68. Where do you think that they got all the purple and all the royal colors? And they got it from anybody outside of Jerusalem that could have made it and sold it. By them buying, for instance, by them buying all these lambs for Passover, people were being financially impacted for the good, right? They were selling all their lambs to the temple, making a killing, and then the temple was turning around and selling the Passover, the sacrificial lambs, the turtle doves, the bulls, the goats, all of these things, and everyone in the known world, at least in that region, was benefiting off of that by what the temple has done. I mean, you think in a silly kind of comparison, we need work done on the church. What do? We hire outside, pay people outside to come and do work in the church. As soon as we moved here, we had a whole new roof put on all the buildings. That's not a sin to do that, but that's just a small scale image of what was taking place here, where they were hiring out. And then we go on into chapter 18, and we see the fall of Babylon. Chapter 18 is the extended lament over Babylon's fall, and it's one of the most powerful pieces of writing in the entire book. You can reference, it is similar to the lament over Tyre in Ezekiel 26 and 27, and Babylon in Isaiah 47 and Jeremiah 50 and 51. The language is similar. And we first see the announcement in verses 1 through 3. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. Right, I got ahead of myself a minute ago because right here is this announcement about what was taking place. And this fallen is Babylon. This echoes Isaiah 13, Isaiah 34, and then, of course, Matthew 23:38, where Jesus, looking at the temple, looking at the religious leaders, says, your house is left to you desolate. And Eusebius and other early church writers describe the site of Jerusalem after its destruction as abandoned and ruined. Like there were stragglers left behind, the poor, those who were not fit to be taken into captivity. And I mean, they've been starving, but they did not die yet, right? And Rome takes many people captive into Rome, marches them into Rome, and leaves some people behind to fend for themselves. And my goodness, they're barely alive as it is, but they're left behind to fend for themselves. And other than that, the whole place is empty, deserted, and destitute. We have the call to come out in verses 4-8. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. For her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning. Since in her heart she says, I sit as a queen, I am no widow, and mourning shall never see me. For this reason, her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. For mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. The call to come out. Look, we can apply this in a way that God today calls us to come out of the world, come out of a false religious system or something like that. But this was a literal come out, talking about a literal city, whether it was Rome or whether it was Jerusalem. It was a call to come out. And we know what happens with, as far as we know, every Christian who was in Jerusalem when Jerusalem was surrounded by armies. And Jesus said, when you see this, flee to the mountains. And after just a few days, Rome falls back because of the civil war in Rome, the threat of the civil war, the division. And all of the Christians said, we remember we were alive when we heard Jesus say this. We heard the churches are all saying this, that when this happens, we remember this word, we got to get out of here. And they all fled to Pella. That's what every one of them did. That was the angel, that was the voice saying, come out and be separated. Because if you stay, you might die. If you stay, you might starve to death. If you stay, you're going to be surrounded by the people who voted for the crucifixion of Christ and who are still in allegiance with Rome, and either in allegiance with Rome or trying to rebel against Rome. And you're not going to be in a good place, so come out. So there is a secondary application for us where, sure, we come out of the world before the world is judged. We come out of false religious systems before they're judged. But we can't overlook the immediate application of how this would have specifically applied to John's audience, those 7 churches, right? And the others to where this letter had gone. There's this call to come out. The double repayment echoes the language of covenant curse that we see in Jeremiah 16 and Isaiah 40. Let's look at verses 9 and 10, and we see the lament of the kings. And here we read, and the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. This is not them specifically being heartbroken, like sympathetic for Jerusalem in that sense. It is all of the wealth that they were getting from Jerusalem. And Jerusalem has fallen in a single day. So the kings of the earth, the ones who were taking advantage of her and she was taking advantage of them, when they see this happen, they say, yeah, well, here goes everything. We got to find a new revenue stream. Who else is going to buy all? Who else is going to buy all my lambs? Who else is going to buy all my goats? It's all gone. Who else is? I mean, are they going to rebuild this temple? It doesn't look like they're going to. They're not going to need my purple. They're not going to need my scarlet. What are we going to do? So that is more of the picture here. The merchants stand far off weeping. And in my research, just this past week, I learned this. I did not know this. You're familiar with the Colosseum in Rome? The Colosseum began to be built in 72 AD under the command of Vespasian, the emperor, the 10th emperor, who was actually the emperor when Jerusalem was captured. And it was funded almost primarily by the plunder of the temple in Jerusalem, and was probably built by the Jewish slaves that they had led in, brought into Rome. Thousands and thousands of Jews who were not killed in Jerusalem were taken captive into Rome, and it would have been free labor in building the Colosseum. So Vespasian literally commissioned the building of the Colosseum, most likely by the hands of Jews, but certainly with the plunder from, it's a historical fact, the plunder from the temple. Talking about part of a judgment, right? Not only is the temple destroyed, but the people who loved the temple are now using the material from the temple to build this Roman Colosseum that would soon be used as a spectacle for Christians to be fed to lions. God really judged Jerusalem. We see the lament of the shipmasters in 17 and 19. We see them throwing dust on their head, which is a mourning gesture. And we see this in Job 2, Ezekiel 27, and again from the lament over Tyre in Ezekiel 27. And we see something amazing in verse 20. Trying to wrap this up in just a minute, but in verse 20, we see something that you might not expect, and some people would give them pause. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. When this happens, Paul and Peter are in heaven and they rejoice. Abel and Zechariah and Jeremiah and Isaiah are in heaven. James, the apostle, is in heaven. Thomas, if he's dead at this point, is in heaven. All the saints of the past are rejoicing at Babylon. Remember, whether it's Rome, whether it's Jerusalem, whoever it is, they are rejoicing at God's judgment. Can we do that? Do we have the heart and the mind to rejoice at God's judgment? They were commanded here. It was a command to rejoice. And then we see in 21 through 24, there's the image of, the imagery here echoes Jesus' words in Matthew 18 about a millstone around the neck. But here a millstone is cast down. Let's look at it. A mighty angel, in verse 21, took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, so will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and be found no more. And the rest of it builds up on that. And so the chapter closes with its most sweeping indictment of all. In her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints and all who have been slain on the earth. This is Matthew 23:35, literally in the mouth of the angel. The entire line of martyred witnesses from Abel forward finds its vindication in the fall of the city. The covenantal account that has been accumulating across all of redemptive history is finally settled. Earlier in Revelation, how long, O Lord? When will you vindicate us? Just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer, Terry, just a little bit longer, and then here it is. And they're vindicated. And we saw in the past couple of weeks, blessed are those now who die in the Lord, because when we die, we're not going to go under an altar and say, Lord, how much longer until you vindicate us? There's something different for those who die now, and that they're not waiting on some sort of a vindication like this. So chapter 17 and 18 are the covenantal judgment of God on the city that bore the accumulated guilt of all the righteous blood shed on earth. The harlot is Jerusalem. The unfaithful covenant partner who killed the prophets, crucified the Son, persecuted the church, allied herself with Rome against the people of God. The beast is Rome, the instrument that she rode and ultimately that devoured her. The fall of Babylon is simultaneously the answer to the martyr's cry, the vindication of the prophets, the fulfillment of Jesus' warnings in Matthew 23 and 24, and the Olivet Discourse, and the clearing of the ground, we could say, for the Lamb's kingdom to advance unhindered among the nations. So Babylon must fall before the kingdom, in this sense, can fill the earth. A sign of, some people say, hey, we've got the temple. What are these guys doing when now the temple's gone? The temple's destroyed. No sacrificial system. You only have the Christians. I mean, you have Judaism that continues, but they continue even today without the temple. And so it was a vindication on them. And then at the bottom, you have a list of some cross references, some that we referenced and maybe a couple we didn't. But before we go upstairs, we got any questions or comments on any of this?